The Hawkeyes have officially accepted the title of little brother in the state of Iowa to Iowa State and are now resorting to cheating to try to level the playing field and get to Iowa State's level. And we're talking about it today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day and making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcasting platform, be sure to hit subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. We will be talking about the University of Iowa in today's episode, kind of the other half of what that Cyclone state is competing against, and their new means of generating revenue, which I kind of think it's cheating. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know how this works. We'll talk about that first. Then we're going to talk about who could be kind of the biggest sleeper in the Big 12 this season. Obviously, Iowa State looking to get back to the Big 12 championship game. We've kind of done a few episodes like this, top 5 most important games, but there's always somebody in the Big 12 that's going to come out of the woodwork. Who could it be this year? I'll talk about that in the second segment. Third segment, we're going to break down where I think Iowa State's weakest links kind of are as far as the football roster goes, and what position groups need to outperform where I have them at right now to lead this team to an outstanding run. Obviously, I think that they can get to the Big 12 championship as is, but what could they do? Obviously, what position could step up to even take them further. Can't wait to dive into all that and more. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Now, some of you may have heard of this. Some of you may have not. That's why I'm talking about it here today. The University of Iowa is now, it's introduced this new concept called the flight funds, where essentially, to my understanding, fans can donate, and it's classified as athletic revenue. I'm not quite sure how this works, to be honest. I haven't seen anything saying that their swarm thing has gone away. I think this is like its own thing. I don't think they renamed it or reclassified it legally. I believe this is an entirely new deal, a whole new entity, if you will, that is giving Iowa an opportunity to basically fund their $20.5 million. The big question here is, one, how's this going to work? Okay, that's a big question. But two, should Iowa State do the same thing? If it works, yes. I really do think that would be the smartest play for Iowa State. I'll talk about that here in a second. But let's talk about how this looks for the University of Iowa. Our good friend Scott Dochterman, if you're a fan of KXNO, obviously you've heard this man before, put out a tweet and he kind of laid this out a little bit, or at least a few pieces here. He said that Iowa hired the former Chiefs GM and Patriots executive Scott Pioli as preparation for revenue sharing and will continue to work with all of Iowa's programs. Pioli has been at Iowa's football practices previously and is close with football coach Kirk Ferentz. In addition, Iowa Athletics will have a cap management structure that includes designated GMs for each program, and then goes on to name a few other roles. Now, obviously, the Chiefs, Patriots, kind of the two dynasties in the NFL and the history of the NFL. A little off topic, but Patriots dynasty significantly better. If you disagree, let me know in the comments or at Twitter, on my Twitter at Nick_Marv. These are smart hires. They really are. And the GM model is one that I think can be laughed at in college athletics, but I don't think it's necessarily it's a bad play. I think if you're able to dedicate a person to be that general manager, I suppose, for, obviously football and men's basketball are going to be kind of the two biggest, but wrestling at Iowa is huge, and women's basketball saw that huge surge with Caitlin Clark. And I can tell you firsthand, a lot of those fans didn't go anywhere. Women's basketball, it saw the surge and it hasn't really backed off. It's not quite obviously at the same level, but it's still a huge part of Iowa athletics. And so those four are going to kind of be the biggest places where a GM is going to be important for Iowa. Obviously, at Iowa State, it's going to look a little bit different. I think softball could be that women's side of it that's going to be huge in the next few years. But obviously, football, men's basketball, women's basketball as well. The wrestling program is just not quite on that same level right now, at least at this very moment in time, in my opinion. Nonetheless, kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent there. Those GMs going to be kind of play a pivotal role here. But the reason I bring up those 4 programs are those are the programs that this flight funds is specifically kind of tailored for. It's got a primary kind of funnel, I guess, for football, men's basketball, women's basketball, and men's wrestling. And then there will also be a general fund that will support revenue sharing programs. I'm not quite sure how that works. So if you donate to the University of Iowa Flight Funds football, does that money go only towards the football generated revenue? I don't know exactly how that works. I don't have the documents, to obviously talk about that, like to really break that down. But I think the concept here is that Iowa can use fan generated donations essentially and claim them as athletic generated revenue, which then can be a part of this rev share model. It can be paid out to the athletes. That's very important because we've talked about this over and over again in the state of Iowa. The Board of Regents has made this decision long time ago. Times are different now. Things could change, but they are not the way they are not changed right now. The university cannot give money to the athletic department, right? So we've talked about Jamie Pollard's interview where he talked about Arizona State is giving the athletic department $50 million a year. And so this $20.5 million, while on the surface, and I've said this, and I still think this to be true, the number can't change. There is a cap. Arizona State University can still only pay their athletes $20.5 million, and Iowa State can only pay their athletes $20.5 million. But when you're getting $50 million from the school, that automatically covers the $20.5 million, and you now have another $30 million on top of what you generate to put towards anything you want in the athletic department. Renovations is the biggest one, but new facilities are obviously in there as well. And there's millions of different other kind of things, that expenses, right, to the athletic department. So that is technically that $50 million. It doesn't mean that Arizona State can spend $50 million on their athletes from the school. Doesn't mean that, but it does mean that they're not hurting as bad from paying out that $20.5 million. And that's been what we've talked about with Iowa State. It's potentially a problem, right? Like that could come back in 5 years to be a major issue for the Cyclones. How could something like this help Iowa State? We're going to continue this conversation right after this. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live, and this year's matchups are already delivering. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop closer to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. I was just on the app looking at Pacers tickets, obviously, and Tyrese Halliburton and the Pacers making this a real deal, 2-1 right now. And the panoramic seat view was something that obviously caught my eye. I love getting to see exactly where I'm at. In Zone Deals, we're offering 60% off in great sections. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So we're still talking about the situation that Iowa has kind of brewed up and how this could affect Iowa State as far as rev share goes. Don't worry, we'll talk about the biggest Big 12 sleepers in football this season. We'll still get to our third segment I just wanted to continue this conversation. Didn't think I should cut it short. We were just talking about Arizona State and the $50 million and how over 5 years, Arizona State's probably going to be in a much better spot than Iowa State. Even if Iowa State is able to pay the $20.5 million to their athletes every season and somehow able to keep up with the cap, which will likely be boosted up to, I believe, what was the number? 33 million at the end of the 10 years. So in 4 years, maybe it's at like 26 or 24 million. It's based on a lot of different factors, so I can't accurately project where that could be, but it will be higher, is my guess, in 4 or 5 years. If Iowa State can keep up with that and still keep putting out the maximum amount that they can, hitting the cap, you're in a much worse spot just because you're not getting that $50 million from the university every year. And now you're having to kind of literally cut into the revenue that's generated. That's kind of how this is supposed to work. But you're cutting into that revenue that's generated and therefore not putting it towards obviously new facilities, which is all of that is really kind of tied into recruiting in the long term. And maybe it ends up not being that big of a deal with the transfer portal. Who knows what this exactly is going to look like? But I think we can all agree more money, probably a better thing. And I don't think Iowa State would be in a more money situation without some changes. And so that is why I bring up this idea that Iowa came up with of the flight funds. Do I love that they came up with it first? Only if things go terribly wrong, to be completely honest. But it does seem like this could, it seems like there's a way that this would work. And I think if it does work, Iowa State needs to do this. If not this exact thing, something very, very close to it. Because even if Iowa State does something like this, it only generates, let's say, $1 million in donations. That's how much they're able to accumulate or accrue. That $1 million is effectively, by the transitive property, $1 million that can be spent on anything but athletes. That's kind of what it is when you think about it, because that $1 million is going to the athletes. Yes, it's going directly into that program, and that program is paying the athletes. But by saving that $1 million that the athletics department doesn't have to pay, now that $1 million that they generate from revenue, or I guess I don't know exactly how it's going to work out, what goes where, but there is now $1 million laying around that Iowa State can spend elsewhere. This could be the key to Iowa State being competitive. And Jamie Pollard talked about Iowa State is going to be in a situation where, are we even in the Power Four? In the next 5-10 years, is Iowa State even in the Big 12? Well, I think we can all agree. Maybe I love the Big 12, actually, so I don't know if we can all agree. I think Iowa State should stay in the Big 12. To me, they are just synonymous. But I think we can all agree that Iowa State staying in the Power 4 is probably the right play. Maybe it's not the Big 12. Maybe it's the Big 10 or the SEC if there's some sort of super duo conference coming, and it's the only way for Iowa State to even have a shot at being in, obviously the college football playoff, which was a whole conversation we've had and we will probably continue to have, even if it is just in some weird Power 2 or a movement into the Big 10, even in which is, I almost want to throw up saying that, or the SEC, even with the Power 4 still, if that, even if there's a movement of some kind, I think we can all agree it's probably better for Iowa State to be in the Power 4 than not. And I think that this is probably the play that allows Iowa State to stay in the Power 4, not to strain themselves too thin, where obviously Pollard talked about the reserve that the athletics department has built up. Once you burn through that reserve, then now what? Now you're actively making $20.5 million less a year. And we've already seen the ramifications of that just in the last few years. We're putting things on hold. I believe the wrestling facility was one of those where it's like Iowa State's kind of struggling monetarily a little bit. Cytown might help, but Pollard talked about on the Cyclone Tailgate Tour that's not linked to athletic generated revenue. So if Cytown brings in $3 billion in 2029, Iowa State athletics won't see a penny of that. Unless they were able to somehow do something like what the Hawkeyes have here, where if It's like a workaround where the Chi-Town is donating a portion of this to a collective sort of revenue generated pool, which is then shipped into the athletic department. Like, if it were something like that, that might be the play. I don't know. I've had the thought of like, what if literally every dollar that's bought that's spent in Chi-Town went to the We Will Collective? Like, how cool would that be? Is that possible? I look. I'm not an economy major or whatever they even are, economics. That's not what I do. That's not what I did. I don't know the answer to those questions. But there's got to be a way for Iowa State to leverage Chi-Town, if not do something very similar to what the Hawkeyes have done here with this flight funds, and effectively work around the major disadvantage that they're at with not being able to take money or even receive money, not take, but receive money from the university. That's a disadvantage. It just is. I mean, it just is. So I think there's got to be a workaround for that. And I think that we might be seeing the blueprint with Iowa, and there's an opportunity for Iowa State to take that, tweak it, make it better. Bing, bam, boom, bam, pow. We're on the next level. So that's the way I'm looking at it. I saw that from Iowa, immediately had to look into it. Couldn't believe my eyes. I don't know how this is possible, but I guess the New England Patriots are sort of involved, so I'm not too shocked. Nonetheless, we can figure this out. We absolutely can figure this out. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the biggest Big 12 sleepers, and then this will probably leak into the third segment, and we'll talk about some of the weak spots on Iowa State's roster. Now, taking a look at Iowa State's schedule for football this season, we kind of talked about some of the most important games. Obviously, Kansas State is in there. Iowa is in there. BYU, TCU, a team that I thought was a very important game, or I guess a game that I thought was really important for Iowa State. Colorado is probably in there. Cincinnati could be one that's actually sort of pivotal. Arizona State going to be a very, very tough team. Throughout that, we kind of talked about what teams I thought that Iowa State would be playing that are going to, like, what teams are going to be really good that Iowa State plays this season. I think that's pretty self-explanatory to some extent. Kansas State going to be very good. BYU, obviously, Retzloff and what's going on legally there is a question mark, but still, I mean, we don't forget how good BYU was last year. Arizona State, I do think TCU is very good. And then who knows? Maybe Colorado's good. I don't know about Kansas. Oklahoma State probably not going to be that good. But in the grand scheme of things. But that's not every team in the Big 12. And so looking at the teams in the Big 12, I think it's fair to assume that Iowa State, Kansas State, probably BYU, Texas Tech, West Virginia is a complete wild card. So I'm going to kind of play them both ways here. Maybe Utah, maybe with some transfer portal movement. Colorado had a lot of transfer portal movement. Some of those teams could be very, very good. But there are teams that just aren't as good. Like, at least right now, the way we're looking at it, they just aren't as good. And we have to talk about them. We do. We're going to talk about them coming up right after this. So the teams that I don't think are going to be very, very good in the Big 12 next year here at Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If I had to pick a handful, I think Arizona, probably not going to be the best team in the Big 12 next year. I think at least not the best team. Okay. I don't think UCF will be the best team. I don't think Cincinnati will be the best team. Houston, probably not going to be the best team. Oklahoma State, TCU, from the public perspective, I'm going to throw them in here. And then I think I'm going to put West Virginia in here too, just because it's so unproven with what we saw Rich Rod do, basically swapping out a whole new roster, right? Now, which teams could be surprising, could be very good next year? I think West Virginia is the easy, like, layup, right? Like the fast break. No one's guarding you. Everyone in the crowd is chanting dunk, dunk, dunk because you're so wide open, but you're 5'4" on the JVB team. And you can't dunk, so you can't go up for it, but it's still a free layup. I think that's the free one, but it's also completely random. We don't know if that team is going to be good or if they're going to be a one-win team. We just don't know right now. We haven't seen hardly anything. Mountaineer Paul over at Locked On West Virginia might have a different answer, but I'm going to take them as my, like, kind of gimme, right? Like, kind of It's like a 4.5-foot putt, but you made a couple 6-footers. Yeah, we'll count it. It's a little questionable, but we'll throw that in there. You know what I mean? I think it's worth at least mentioning that West Virginia could be really good. TCU, I think, is probably the biggest sleeper, just because of obviously their year last year was not what I think a lot of people thought it could have been, and I don't know if a lot of people still have obviously their national championship appearance kind of in their minds, but it's a portion of it. I obviously one of the best quarterbacks with Hoover, I think is going to play a large role in how TCU does this upcoming season. And looking at their schedule outside of the non-conference, which they do play UNC, they have Arizona State, Colorado, K-State. That's a tough 3. Baylor's going to be probably pretty good, and West Virginia as their first 5 conference games. West Virginia, like I said, could be that team. Then they play Iowa State, BYU, and close out with Houston, Cincinnati. So in all fairness, TCU does have, I mean, maybe the toughest schedule in the Big 12 next season. Maybe. But I will say this too. If TCU comes out of the non-conference and is, let's say, because they play SMU as well, let's say they're 1-2, and then they lose to Arizona State, maybe they eke by Colorado, they lose to Kansas State by a really close one. So now they're at 4, they're 2-4. They play Baylor. Let's say they get Baylor and they get West Virginia, but nothing convincing yet. So they should be 4-4 then, right? 3, 6, 8 is what I got them at. They play Iowa State coming off of a bye. From Iowa State's perspective, where is TCU in that, right? They lost to some really good teams. If they lose to UNC, SMU, K-State, and Arizona State, or whatever the case is, pick any 4 really. But let's say they pick those 4, or they pick those 4. They end up losing to those 4. Where can you really gauge that? This team could be very, very good just up against a tough schedule. So that's one of my sleepers for sure. And then also, I don't think I'm going to take Arizona here. UCF would be surprising to me. Houston it could make some moves. I think Colorado is one. Like, are they really a sleeper? A lot of people aren't considering them to be in the same form they were last year with Shedeur and Travis Hunter gone. So that's a portion of it. I think that they'll be better than people think they're going to be. I don't think they're a true sleeper per se. I don't know if they'll perform at that level. Kansas maybe in that conversation. I feel good about TCU, and then the West Virginia being that wild card in there. Oklahoma State could be something potentially, but nonetheless, I think the real question here is, what is a sleeper, right? Because do they need to get top 3 in the conference? Like Arizona State going from picked last to the champion, like that's a sleeper, right? Or could it be somebody like Kansas last year, who middle of the season nobody thought was any good, then they win like 5 in a row and completely just wreck the Big 12 rankings. The way they tore through the conference, I don't think I'll ever forget. It was unbelievable. Is that a sleeper? I don't think that's probably a sleeper. Let me know if you disagree. I don't think it is. Probably. They probably have to go from really underrated to a good standing. So with that, I guess by that definition, in the circumstance that TCU is 4-4 against Iowa State, just better than they appear by record, that doesn't make them a sleeper. Like, it just doesn't. And so for that reason, I wonder if the team that could end up being a sleeper is Cincinnati. Cincinnati plays Nebraska, tough game. Bowling Green, Northwestern State. They play Kansas. Then they're against Iowa State at home, right? That's going to play a small role. Cincinnati, Ohio. They're going to UCF, Oklahoma State, or they're home against UCF, excuse me. Then going to Oklahoma State, Baylor, Utah, Arizona, BYU, TCU. Let's act under the assumption that TCU is very good. BYU, question mark. Let's say they're good. Okay, that's 2 teams. Baylor, I think, could be really good. Iowa State could be really good as well. I think they are going to be really good. So that's 4 teams. And then Nebraska, which is a question mark, I feel like. Never really know with Nebraska. That's 4.5 teams that are like better than Cincinnati. But then you're looking at Kansas, UCF, Oklahoma State, probably Utah, Arizona. That's 5. They're 5 and I mean, it's not impossible that they win 2 of those games that they're not as like I just Cincinnati, I think it has the schedule to get things done, kind of be that team that literally no one is talking about. I have not heard anybody talking about Cincinnati at all, personally. I think they could be that team. But, I mean, who knows? Who knows at this point? Maybe Arizona literally doesn't lose a game all year long. Maybe they're just inspired by the sun out in in Arizona. I don't know. All right, let's move on to kind of the biggest weak spot for Iowa State this season. Make this quick. I don't think that there are huge weak spots on this roster, to make it very clear. I think that this roster is very, very good. I think that Iowa State is going to be able and probably will put up a 10-win season. I think that they're going to be able to do it. There will be challenges along the way. I won't say they'll do it no problem. They're not looking at a schedule like Cincinnati, that's for sure, but they are very good. And so the biggest weak spots kind of coincide with question marks for me. That's how I want to put it. I'm not looking at any of these and saying, yeah, we're cooked. We are so done for. Pack them up, go home. That's actually the best option here. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there are some areas where there are question marks. I'm not really sure what will happen, at least right now. For me, I think it'd be a little bit of a bad call not to say wide receiver. And I think that there is so much upside. The ceiling is ridiculously high for the wide receiver room in Sowell and Townsend, and then Eli Green getting in there as well. Brett Eskelson, a guy that's been talked about, and we'll talk about the wide receiver room tomorrow on Farmageddon Friday with Christian Rao of Kansas State, Locked On Kansas State. That'll be a fun one. We'll go more in depth on what I expect from these wide receivers. But this is one that is kind of a prove-it moment, right? So I think across the board, you got big shoes to fill. What can this unit do? I've talked so highly on the tight end group. Obviously, what I think the running backs can do. I think we're going to be okay in the passing game. But what will the wide receivers be able to contribute? On the offensive side of the ball, to me, that's the play. That's the question mark. I think Rocco is going to be that guy. And then, obviously, I think the tight end room, so many guys returning from injury. Cooper Alexander, if he gets a chance to see the field, that could be another guy. I think we're looking at a very good offensive set across the board. I do think the wide receivers will be good, but they have a question mark kind of by their, I would say name, but like symbol, WR, like the symbol. On the defensive side of things, personally, I am going to go with the secondary. Defensive back, safety. It's not impossible that this team is as good as last year, or this unit, but the unit last year was so unreal, so unbelievably good that it's like, can they? I think they'll get a lot of help from the linebackers, with tons of guys returning from injury at the linebacker position, and is really that unit is full of talent. Full. We talk about the guys returning, but what we don't really talk about that often is the guys that got a lot of reps in last year due to injuries, and so they got to see the field. So now they're a little bit better. They have some more game speed reps against Big 12 competition. Like that's going to play a role. So the linebacker room is also deeper now as a result of that. I think that will affect the passing game. The defensive line, also a little bit of a question mark, but I will cite why I picked the secondary over the defensive line in a second here. If the defensive line can be better, then that's going to pressure the quarterbacks and force them to make throws quicker. The secondary doesn't have to be as good. There is a chance that this defensive unit could be unbelievable. The reason I picked the defensive back position is kind of the vibe I've gotten throughout the offseason of like, who is the leader? Well, we're not really sure yet. What does the secondary need to do? Well, they kind of need to mature a little bit. Like those kinds of vibes are super not legitimate, if you will, but also just raise my red flags a little bit, perk my ears up just a little bit. That's why I took them here. I think that the offensive line also with Tomotoa McDonough could make a huge difference there. We haven't really seen that. So that's why I picked the secondary, but that doesn't mean that they can't be really good, because I think as a unit, this team is going to be very, very good. and I think that they'll get it done. Speaking of getting it done, I heard that click. You hitting the subscribe down there? Shout out to you. It's free. You help prove it's a Cyclone state. You guys are the best. Thank you guys for sticking around to this point in the episode. Come back tomorrow for Farmageddon Friday with Christian Rao, where we break down more on this upcoming Farmageddon match in Dublin, Ireland. Until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.